Okay, so this is the start of a new video series on Vasari, in particular Vasari Beta 2, which is the current release, which should run for the most part through spring. And this first video, we're simply going to look at the interface, a very, very brief introduction to the interface, and then an introduction to the massing tools inside of Vasari. So the first thing we'll notice is Vasari launches with a 3D modeling view. It also launches with a location of Boston, Massachusetts that you can see located right underneath the view cube. Navigating around the workspace, the wheel mouse is going to zoom in and out. If I hold down, so I'm going to click and hold the wheel on the mouse, I can pan. And then the next thing that I can do is, if I shift and use the middle mouse, I can orbit whatever is selected on screen, or I'm going to orbit around the XYZ origin. I can also use the view cube and click on any particular view on the view cube. And you'll notice that my view is not an axonometric view, it is a perspective view. It doesn't quite look like that in the top view without anything built, but it is definitely a perspective view. If I go to an elevation, I can actually see the edges of things. And that is this determined in the project browser right here. So these are the different views that come up by default. If I go to the default 3D view, which is the default 3D view in Revit as well, and double click, you'll notice that I now am in an axonometric view. So if I move level, I'm actually seeing something in elevation. So this is still a volumetric view or a 3D view, but it is an axonometric kind of view. And that's the view that I'm most typically comfortable in working with. So I'm going to go ahead and start in this 3D view, this default 3D view right here. So the next thing to look at, we'll get to properties a little bit later on in the tutorials, but let's go ahead and look at the top ribbon. Right here is what this is called. Beginning with the big V, that is where I have my saves, imports, and exports. Then I have a series of tabs right here. The one that we'll be using primarily in this tutorial is the modeling tab, in particular the Create Mass tool. But then we also have Analyze, Manage, Add-ins, and Modify. Now this ribbon is contextually sensitive to whatever I'm doing on screen. So as soon as I activate a tool like Create Mass, the ribbon is going to change, and it's going to change tool sets. If I'm working and I'm selecting something, the ribbon is going to change based on what it thinks you're going to do next. So don't always count on things being in the exact same spot. It sounds annoying at first, but sort of once you get the hang of how the ribbon is going to flex and move and adapt with how you're working, just embrace it and run with it. It's actually a really cool and clever thing that sort of continually updates based on how people are sort of naturally working in the program. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to grab a site and start building a massing model on that. And that's what we're going to take this first tutorial through. So I'm going to go to the Analyze tab and select Location. And the first thing it's going to ask me to do, if I have not done this yet, is sign in. So you need to do that with your Autodesk username and password. So I'm going to log in really quick. And now you can see that I've signed in right up here at the top. And essentially this gives me what looks identical to Google Maps with a few key things on it. My default site is showing up as a little house with an arrow. So this is in Boston with my latitude and longitude. And then you'll note these guys are weather stations. The one in this orange color right here is the default weather station that is being used for this location. So we are not doing a project in Boston, Massachusetts. We are doing a project in Ripley, Tennessee. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit on this, and I do want to be fairly precise. with the placement. So I'm actually going to switch to a satellite view. And we're going to zoom in. And right now I'm starting to see the downtown square that you all should be very familiar with if you're in my 225 class. And we know that is the site of our multimodal train station. So if I zoom out a little bit from here, and I'm just using the wheel to zoom out, you can see that there are weather stations, should be weather stations, reasonably close. Wow, I hope. Oh, they're a little bit far away. You know, this one is 8 miles away, 12.5 miles away. It looks like the default one right here is 5 miles away. So, you know, that's not going to get my microclimate data. It's definitely going to get my macroclimate data, if you guys remember that from last semester. So the larger environmental effects are definitely going to be part of that weather data that's going to come in with grabbing this site. What you're not going to get is specific wind patterns and weather patterns that might be influenced by the very immediate surrounding buildings and terrain. So just kind of keep that in mind and remember it. So I want to go ahead and grab this portion of the site for my project. And I'm going to click Import Site Image and Import. And so I now have that site as well as relevant weather data in place. Okay, and that is to scale as well. So if I were to come across and let's look at, let's look at just putting a line in. If I measure down the length of this street, that's 270 feet, 176, something like that along this edge. That is a 1-to-1 scale along the street. So that's a really important thing. It's very handy to use. So let's go ahead and again, we're starting at the beginning of doing a very simple, very conceptual massing model of your project. So I'm wanting to reduce this project down to sort of the most simple geometry that we can, which for almost everybody is going to be basic boxes. So I'm going to start by building a mass. But before we do that, I want to introduce the concept of working on a reference plane. So right now you'll see this box right here, this light blue box. That is a reference plane, and essentially think of it as a virtual piece of paper that I can draw on. And that virtual piece of paper gives me a point in space to draw lines on, and then I can extrude lines into three-dimensional geometry. If I come in and select a different line, you'll see that reference plane is moved up a notch. So let's just look at the difference really quick. If I go to Model, and then I'm going to go to Create Mass, and I'm going to start by drawing a box. I've got this reference plane, this lower reference plane selected. It's going to draw that box on that lowest reference plane. If I were to select a different reference plane, like this one at the top, and then we're to go to Model and Create Mass. Well, it's snapping me down. See how it snapped me down to the lower one? That's a little bit of a new thing, at least to me, that Vasari is doing. But let's say that I want to change that reference plane. I can simply go to Set Work Plane, and I'm going to select this upper reference plane. And now rather than drawing that box, you can still faintly see it right here. If I draw that same box again, it's going to place it on the upper reference plane. Okay? If you've ever worked in SketchUp and you've been drawing along and all of a sudden things were you thought you were drawing a square and you end up with something completely bizarre, this is Vasari and Revit's response to that. It's a little more technical. It takes a little while getting used to, but it is very precise. You always know what plane you're drawing in. At the same time, I can select planes to work in that are at any angle, and we'll get to that as we get more advanced as well. But I can also draw on a vertical reference plane. So I'm going to go set work plane again, select this one right here. Now if I draw a box, it's actually going to draw it on the X, Z, or YZ axis. I'm not sure which one I'm on. I just know that it's oriented vertically. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of that, and I'm going to say cancel the mask so it's just not creating anything, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And let's actually look at making a more precise massing model object. So I'm going to start again on this lower level reference plane, level 1 reference plane. And now even if you're working with a 2-story building, in particular a lot of you had a building that was going down into the ground, we're not going to worry about that right now. We want to keep this simple. You're learning the software. We're just going to keep things as simple as we can at the beginning of the semester. So, and also because if you'll note, this terrain is flat. I would anticipate that at some point Vasari might change that they might actually bring in the 3-dimensional terrain geometry. Right now it's giving you a flat swatch of land. As we move into Revit, we will fix that. We'll show you how to bring in a terrain to model on. Okay, so what I'm going to start with is, if you guys can remember Tony's project, I'm going to start creating a mass that sort of would be the simplification of Tony's project, which was sort of this tent-like structure with arches over the top of it. So I'm going to use the Create Mass tool, and I'm going to start by drawing a line. And I know I'm drawing on this level 1 reference plane, so I'm just going to start somewhere right here along the railroad tracks, and I'm going to go along parallel with the railroad tracks for 30 feet. So I've left click once. I'm going to move my cursor along the railroad tracks, and I'm just going to type in the number 30 and then enter. And that gives me a 30-foot long line. I'm going to come perpendicular, and if you notice, this is going to snap to perpendicular. If I sort of move my mouse along, it'll actually snap to perpendicular. It will also snap to parallel. But I'm going to move my cursor along this edge until it snaps to perpendicular, and I'm going to make this edge 20 feet. Now all I need to do, I don't need to type in the foot symbol like that. It knows, Vasari knows that the first number is feet. I can put in, if I would like, the next number is inches, and I can even do the last number as an increment of inches. If you're getting that technical with Vasari, at this point you're probably missing it. This is sort of designed to be quick and loose, not really to be as precise at this point in terms of your design thinking. So keep things simple, keep things closer to whole numbers. I'm just going to do 20, enter, and now I'm going to go over. I'm going to snap perpendicular, and I'm going to watch for this reference snap right here. And I'm just going to click again and again, just like that. And if you notice, that has made this base object for me. I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to extrude that object by left clicking and dragging that arrow up. And I'm going to bring it up to, the default that I brought it up to there was 10 feet. And I'm just going to change that. Let's just change it to, let's say, 12 feet. So again, I just selected that number, typed in the number 12, and now I have a 20 by 30 by 12 foot tall box. So I'm going to build a my next box adjacent to that. So I'm going to start by this endpoint. So again, I'm just hovering over that. I'm waiting for my endpoint snap. And I'm going to come out parallel 10 feet. I'm going to modify my angle on this one a little bit. And I'm going to bring that over 20 feet again. I'm going to bring this edge back 50 feet. I'm going to work off of the parallel snapping again, and I'm going to find that reference for the intersection right here, intersection and perpendicular, and then I'm going to close that off. It's a piece of geometry just like that. I'm going to select that. I'm going to drag this arrow to pull it up. And if you notice, I went just a little bit higher than the next edge. And again, I want to have some level of precision. 16 feet 5 and 75 128ths of an inch is a little bit ridiculous. So I'm just going to change that to, let's say, 16 feet even. And again, I did that simply by I'm selecting the object. I'm looking at this dimension, clicking once on it, and editing that number. Okay, so I want to do one more box right here at this location. So again, I'm going to start with my line tool. I'm going to start someplace right around here, and I'm going to come out feet. Now, if you notice, that went really in the weird direction for me. So let's try that one more time. And that might be because I have the wrong reference plane selected. If you notice that reference plane, it looks like it's using that roof right now as a reference plane. So let's change that again. I'm going to go Set. I want to make sure I'm drawing on level 1. Yeah, see that snap that blue plane back down to my ground level again. I think when I had selected this roof, it moved my reference plane up. I'm going to select Set that and make sure that I'm drawing on that level 1 plane. So let's draw this one more time. Off of this point, I'm going to come over 20 feet. I'm going to draw this line over 30 feet. And then I'm going to close this piece back to build that box. And wow, it did something terribly wrong. Let's try that one more time. Again, the reference plane thing, it takes a little while to get used to. I thought I was drawing that in the right reference plane, but somewhere along the lines I messed that up. So let's try that one more time. Line, I'm going to come in and draw along. You know, I think what was happening on my first click, I actually think it's setting up a new reference plane. So if you watch what's being highlighted, if on my first click I have this surface highlighted, it's going to assume that I want to draw on that as a reference plane, which is incorrect. So on some ways it's really convenient because I can do things like that, but you know, kind of like when Word does things to you like indent something or put everything in bullet form and you really don't want it to, it's kind of doing the same thing. So let's make sure that I'm starting on this reference plane by not clicking on that surface as my first point. I'm actually going to come over here and I'm going to start this next cube by coming into the cube like that, and then across, and then out, and I'll connect that surface together. And I believe that's got it this time. Oh, I hit the help button there. Okay, so I'm going to select that surface. We're going to extrude that up by 12 feet. And I'm getting that now as my massing model. Again, this is a massive simplification of what we had, but it's getting about the right surface area, similar shape. It's letting me sort of see the size of the building on the site, and it's going to allow me in a really simple way to start doing basic tests in terms of how well this is going to function. And that is what we want to be at. That's where we need to be on this simple massing model for Vasari.